Well, hello, everybody. My name is Tanya, and I am an alcoholic. That's all right, Kevin. I give people three chances um, to get that one right. Yeah. So I'm super excited to be here. Uh, I don't know where everyone is. It looks like everybody is everywhere, which is kind of awesome and cool. I am personally here in Southern California. I heard someone say they're buried under snow somewhere, and I was like, whoa, yeah, if that's Frank from Vermont. Um, it's not snowing here. We get a little bit of rain and we're like, oh, um, uh, but yeah, I'm super excited to be here. My sobriety date is May 4th of 1999. So in a few weeks here, I'm going to have 25 years and I'm going to have a party. We're going to have a party. And and my home group is a Paramount Speakers group, and Maureen H is my sponsor. Some of you guys might know her, Michael and Maureen. She's not Maureen H anymore. I'm sorry, Maureen C. Michael and Maureen got married a few years back, but Maureen's been my sponsor for a very long time. And when I got sober, I didn't know why. Well, the first time I got sober, I didn't get it at all. And I was sober for 3 years. And that just proves to me that you could stay sober for a while and still not get it at all. That it takes sometimes a little bit longer than that. So, but I had relapsed after 3 years. And when I came back this time is when I got Maureen as a sponsor. And that's when I got a home group. And that's when I started to really, and it didn't happen quickly. On the educational variety, I learned things very slowly. If you're new, welcome. You don't have to digest this all at one time. It takes a while. It's a lot slower than taking the first drink. It doesn't get you there as fast as taking a drink, but I'll tell you what, it's way better. If you want some real tools to really deal with life, which I always used to try to deal with by drowning it in alcohol or anything else. That this is something that has really worked in it, and I've seen it work in not just my life and only in my life in retrospect, but I really get to see it work in other people's lives, and what a gift that is, right? What This is the greatest show on earth. You don't want to miss it. They write movies about lives like ours, right? It's almost impossible to imagine coming from where I came from to be where I'm at today. I could not have come up with that on my own, not in a million years. I could have stayed physically sober and not been in AA and could have never came up with the tools that I have in my tool bag because I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous and because of other people sharing their experience and because of the process of the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, right? Like what a good life this is. So if you're new, stick around long enough for real change to happen. And I promise you, you'll be given a set of tools that make life, even in the rough times, life is good. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about what it was like and what happened and what my life is like today. So I grew up here in Southern California. I live right outside Long Beach. So I'm in Lakewood right now, and the city I grew up in is like 2 miles away. It's Bellflower, California. So it's like I've been here my whole life. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. My parents were very young parents. They had 4 kids between the age of 18 and 22. So there was like these 2 kids raising 4 little kids. And so there was never a dull moment in my house, right? So I'm 53 years old. I was born in 1970. So I grew up in the 70s where, back in those times, you played in the street until the street lights came on. You cannot do that here in Southern California anymore because there's too many dang cars, right? You can't even let your kids go anywhere near the street over here, let alone play in the street. But back then you could play in the street and ride your bikes around and, you can hear your mom yelling for you 5 blocks away. And I don't remember anything bad when I was a kid, right? I mean, my mom and dad fought a lot. Again, they were young parents and I was just there with all the other kids. So we always had action going on, digging holes and climbing trees and, doing the things kids do. But what happened is when I was 7 years old, and I don't remember this being having a profound effect on me, but it did change the dynamics as my mom and my dad separated. And what ended up happening is my mom ended up being a single mom to 4 kids. And because we're so close in age, what ended up happening is we all turned into teenagers at the same time, which is, if anybody's lived through teenagers or remember when you were one, it was not an easy feat for my mother. So, and again, I at the time, like I was the youngest, so I was like I was going to be the best kid, and I got myself up for school, and I always did good in school, and I was the good kid, and I loved getting attention because I was good and they were not. All right, like, and I loved that. But what happened is when I was about 12, 2 of my siblings almost died from alcohol related incidents. My 13-year-old sister had guzzled a half a gallon of Bacardi and went into an alcohol coma and was in the emergency room. And at the time, my mom was working really late into the night, like till 2 a.m. And so I was the one at home taking the calls from, that there were no cell phones back then, right? Like call your house. So I was the one taking the calls, and I was, and then 4 days after that happened with my sister, my brother was drunk and attempted suicide and ended up in an emergency, and had he been sober, he wouldn't have done that. But either way, it happened. And again, I was there when it happened, and it was bad. And for me, I went to school the next day because school was the only sense of normalcy in my life. So I was just that kid that would get up and go to school, right? Like, because I still do it today. Like, I don't call in work for emotional hangovers. If I'm having an emotional time, I'd rather be sick to my stomach sitting in a structured environment than all by myself. And that's just the way I've always dealt with things. And, and at this point, I'm 12 years old, and I've already taken my first drink. I don't know when it was. I was the experimental child. I was the one that my siblings were like, let's see what happens when she does it. Right. So like they would like slip me shots of tequila, or I'd be stealing pot from my brother who thought he was the local pot dealer. Right. And I don't know what it was about the late 70s and the early 80s, but it just didn't seem like a big deal that us little kids were partying. Right. Like, I just remember at 9 years old stealing home. I don't know. It might have been parsley, but it looked like homegrown, like shake weed. We'd steal it from these hippie babysitters down the street. My friends were babysat by these hippies, and we'd steal it and we'd smoke it before we got on the school bus. We had to reek like it when we got on the bus, and nobody ever said anything. It was just a weird time. That 80s alone were the really weird time. So anyways, once all this starts happening in my family, our family therapy started. We started like having psychiatrists and psychologists and family therapy groups, and just, all this stuff going on. And during that time, my oldest sister, so they didn't have treatment centers the way for adolescents the way they do today. Back then they had mental institutions that you could put your kid in. And they were popping up everywhere in the 80s, right? There were these adolescent units. And back then, like here right now in California, you get 90 days of insurance, and after that, you're on your own, right? But back then, insurance never ran out. And so my sister put herself into this institution. She was 16. She did very well. She got help from it. And so what happened is when me and my sister that was just older than me, when we started running wild, my mom knew about these institutions. So at 13 years old, I got put into an institution, right? And in this institution, if you throw a temper tantrum, 5 big guys come and strap you down in 5-point restraints and give you some Milleril or Thorazine and call it a day, right? Like, that's just the norm for in there. That was what they did. And and at the time, again, I still felt like I wasn't as bad as they were, right? They were worse than me. I was kind of messing up in seventh grade. My grades were slipping. I did start partying. See, I look at my first drink as when I started drinking with my friends, not my sister, not my brother's friends slipping me shots. Just when I went out with my friends and I was drinking with intention. Um, so that I had started to do in the seventh grade. And we used to stand in front of a liquor store over here. So back then, they didn't have direct deposit for your check. So on Friday, everybody get their paycheck and they go to the liquor store to cash it, to pick up some booze, right? On a Friday. And everyone got paid on Friday. And we'd stand out there panhandling. Can we have $1? Can we have $1? And then we'd be like, can you buy us a bottle? Right. And that was how we got our booze. And nobody told me to drink like this. I just intuitively knew to hold my breath and guzzle. Right. Like I don't know if I thought I wasn't going to get my fair share or if I was just trying to get wasted, but that is how I drank from the beginning to oblivion. And I'm an angry drunk. All the women in my family are not good drinkers. We're sort of vicious. And, and for me, like bottling up being the good kid when I drank, I got to let my rage out is what I did. And I did. I was very sensitive when I was drinking. If I thought that you thought something, I might try to attack you. Right. Like that's just the way I drank. And so anyways, at 13, I had started partying with my friends and it got interrupted by being put in these institutions, which I was in and out of for the whole eighth grade, the seventh to eighth grade summer and the whole eighth grade. And you know what? I did really well. I did really well in school in there. I finished the eighth grade in 6 months, had credits towards the ninth grade. And all I can say is like they let us out the day school got out for summer. That was mistake number one, right? We came home to an unstructured environment. It was summertime. No school, nothing. Mom's still working late. And my brother and sister, the older two, were partying in the house. Right. So I came home to a party house and I can tell you, I never had a sober day from the day I got home from that institution to the day I got to Alcoholics Anonymous the first time in handcuffs. I never had a sober day other than times I was incarcerated. And so at 14, I came home and the party was on over there and it was the 80s and there was a lot of other substances going around that made you really thirsty and made you want to drink a whole lot more, right? And you could handle it and not pass out. And it's so funny. I was talking to my mom the other day, like she's like, oh my God, what was happening? Like, because my mom was like naive. I don't think that she knew that we were doing as much as we were doing. I think she kind of gave up because we were all wild children and she just gave up. She ran away from home. My mom ran away from home and left us all there. And so our house was a party house, but she was like, what? There were like, because there was a lot of drugs running around the streets in the 80s. There was a lot of cocaine in the 80s and they were running through my house. I don't know how my older sister knew some guy who knew some, people who were doing a lot of heavy drug dealing. So it was in my house. So at 14, that's what I did. I was drinking hard alcohol. I didn't like beer unless I was beer bonging it because I couldn't get there fast enough with beer. I had to have a hard alcohol. But anyways, this is going on in the 80s and I'm a poser. Okay. So I'm in this institution. I'm really kind of an analytic, book smart. I know who I am today. Right. But back then when you're young and you're trying to be cool, I don't know what's cool. Right. I don't know what's cool. So whatever you think is cool, I'll think is cool that day. And I'm just a poser, really. Right. I went into the institution with a crop top because my older sister crop topped my hair. And I guess I was a headbanger. And then when I got out of the institution, I found out in high school, punk rock was what was cool. So I dyed my hair black and all my clothes were black. And I never really quite nailed punk rock. I was more like the basket case from the Breakfast Club, just kind of creepy and weird and just not, I just was never, and I could hang out anywhere. I hung out with bikers, I hung out with gangsters. I was just like everywhere, whatever. Just I didn't know how to be true to myself. So anyways, I get out of this institution, I start partying. And so like now I'm punk rock and I have a cape. I have this cape my friend gave me that I would like when I ran away from home was my blanket. So I ran away from home when I was 15, and me and my cousin used to hitchhike from Long Beach down to Huntington Beach and and just go and party with a bunch of people we shouldn't have been partying with, and ending up doing things with people I didn't want to do things with, right? Like I just put myself, I look back on it and we put ourselves in some really unsafe situations and we were just children. But again, I'm a tough chick and I'm like, you can't tell me anything. I'm that gnarly teenager, right? Just gnarly. I'm angry at my mother. I let that resentment towards my mother putting me in that institution keep me drunk and loaded for a very long time until, yeah, and I'll go into that. But anyways, I I ran away, but then I came home. I'm like, I could party at home. Why am I sleeping in people's back porches, right? I can go party at home and have a bed to crash out in. So I went home and I was partying, and then I met this guy, and 4 months later I find out I'm pregnant. And and right before that I had I was partying so much that I was having grand mal seizures. So I was essentially overdosing. I was drinking for 5 days in a row, staying up, doing other things, and just my body shut down. And I look back on that and I know for sure I don't have the mind of a normal person, because even a normal person going through a phase in their life would have said, "Oh, I almost died. Uh-oh." Right? Like, shoot. And that never crossed my mind. I walked out of the hospital after having a CAT scan on my head, and I wanted to know where the party was. And then everyone else is looking at me, "Go home, little girl, you're gonna die," right? Like nobody wanted to party with me, and that just pissed me off, right? So anyways, that's the kind of the alcoholic mind that I have. Like I don't even care if I die. Um Shortly after that, I ended up getting pregnant, and our big solution was we were going to move to Arizona and start a new life, but we didn't have a car. So we were going to hitchhike to Arizona, which is probably about 6 hours away. And all of you won't know, but I made it to this place called Fontana, which is about 45 minutes away in the middle of the desert. Um, People here in Southern California think that's funny because it's the middle of nowhere, right? And they know where it's at, and they're like, "Oh, it's nowhere near Arizona." But I got stuck there my entire pregnancy, and I'm grateful that I did, because I didn't have access to what I would have had access to at home. But either way, I mean, I'm pregnant, and then, and I'm yelling at my mom, send me my child support. I was just a hateful child. But who do you call when you're about to have a baby? I'm like, "Mom, can you come get me?" Right? So my mom comes to get me, and I'm 8 months pregnant on my 18th birthday. So when I have my daughter, I'm barely 18 years old. And and the 80s had turned to the 90s, and one stimulant turned to another. And with this other stuff, I just stayed up for 5 years one night. I just did not, the next 5 years of my life are a blur. I ended up my daughter's dad and I were together for about 9 months, but like it just wasn't working out. And then I broke up with him, and he took my kid and hid from me, and I didn't know where he was. And really, like I look back on it, it just gave me an opportunity for me to get on my bicycle and start riding around town partying. And that's what I did. I did that for a lot of years in a row. I'd been going into the local dive bar since I was 15, so it was no different at this time. And I was the kind of drinker that would like get a pint from the liquor store before I went to the bar, because I didn't want to pay for the drinks at the bar. And literally I would drink a pint in 2 drinks. Now, because I was doing other stuff, I wasn't blacking out all the way, but I promise you I was nothing nice. Yeah, I was very sensitive. If you If I thought you were thinking something about me, I would attack you. Um, I went to jail a couple times during this time, and um, I don't jail well. I'm like the I'm like the drunk chick on Cops, who they put tape over your mouth and strap your wrist to the floorboard, because they can't control me. That's who I am. They regret running into me. They regret finding me, right? Because I make their night very long. Um, so anyways, I'm just doing this. I'm running around doing a whole lot of nothing for 5 years of my life. And I got married for a minute on accident. And yeah, that poor guy. Uh, I ran through their house and caused all kinds of drama. And then what happened for me, the first time I got sober, what happened was, so this guy that I had married he got busted with a lot of stuff, and he was going to prison, and he was 20 years older than me, and my stepdaughter was 3 years younger than me. And so when he went to prison, she kicked me out of the house. And I just got on my bike and drove away. And I said, I don't need you anyways, right? Because that's just how I live my life. And but somebody asked me, do you want to go to Mexico and get some pot? And I'm like, yeah. And mind you, we're 2 hours from Tijuana, 2.5 hours maybe from Tijuana, from where I live. And I'm like, yeah, I'll go. I'm not busy, right? Riding my bike around. So I go down there, and we weren't going to Tijuana. We went to El Centro, which is 8.5 hours away. And it's in the middle of nowhere, right? Like, it's like, if there's a nowhere, this is it. So I go with these people, and we go down there, and I go in the bar because I think I'm a tough chick. I drink 5 triple shots of Cuervo 1800. And I don't remember leaving the bar. I don't remember instigating violence like they said I did. I don't remember any of that. All I know is we did get over the border that time. And once I came to, I had poisoned myself with alcohol. My hands were shaking, and I just wanted to go home. And so I just jumped in this van. I didn't know what was in there. I didn't even care. I wanted to go home. I don't know about you, but when I'm in the middle of my lifestyle, I'm not the geographic person. I like to know where the back streets are, the stop signs and the dips, and you know what I mean? I like to know the back streets. I'm not running off to strange places. So for this, it made me very uncomfortable. So I punched it and went home, and drove all night long. And I slept off the hangover. And mind you, I didn't get paid. I didn't even get to smoke a joint. And they were like, do you want to go again? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go. So I get in the car again, and I go again. And this time they stop us as we're coming back over the border. And I think I don't even know why they let me drive. I didn't even have a license. And I think they asked for your license at the border. But either way, they stopped us, and they were like, took us out of the car, and we're like, the dogs went in there, and we're like, hey, we left our dogs at home, right? And and I'm a little loser chick, okay, from Bellflower, and I'm 5 pounds of pot would have been a lot of pot, okay, for someone like me. But they found 157 pounds of pot in the car, and everything I never did with my life flashed before my eyes. I'm like, and I didn't jail well this night either. But I'm like, I can't be here right now. I got to go get my kid. This is what I'm telling them. I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I got to go get my kid. And my head's like, you need to go to college or something. You got to do something. This isn't your life. This can't be it, right? But anyway, so I ended up going to MCC San Diego we kept saying, we didn't know. And this other girl kept saying, they knew. So, I actually, they knew I was a nobody. They knew I was some loser chick that got in the car. So they basically said, I was the last one to get out. No one would bail me out. My bail was $20,000, so they needed $2,000. I was too risky. to put up $2,000 on. So I ended up staying in there the longest, and at the time, under 100 pounds was a misdemeanor. They were looking for cocaine in those days, right? Like they were looking for the harder stuff coming over the border, but still, it was a big deal for me. And um, I ended up doing 6 months in federal jail, and that was the first time since I was 14 years old that I had had any period of sobriety, a complete abstinence from everything. So what happened is I instantly gained 20 pounds because I forgot to eat or sleep for a couple years. Um, the world didn't look as, you know what I mean? It just didn't look as daunting. I started to like, and I can only liken it to like having hope, right? Oh, maybe I can go to school. Maybe I can do this. And, and the church people were coming into jail. They didn't have meetings coming in, but and that was great because, I'm down to go to church in jail. But I will tell you what I'm not down with is when I walk out the doors and they let me out of there, I'm not walking to the nearest church door saying, hey, here I am, sign me up, right? With all, I couldn't do something like that. So what happened for me was I ended up, out for a couple weeks, and I'm like, I'm 21, I can drink, right? And then bad idea. I'll just say the guy who took me out for a drink that night regretted picking me up because I'm sensitive, right? And I told you I gained 20 pounds. So what I think happened is I think that he thought that I was fat. So I tried to attack him. So anyways, that's the kind of alcoholic that I am. Anyways, I ended up, they let me out of jail, but I was on federal probation. And I had like a 3-year federal probation. And what happened is I couldn't pass their tests. You know what I mean? I just couldn't pass their tests. And eventually, about a year after, they came and picked me up. And I remember being so relieved when the federal marshals came to pick me up because I was tired. And I just knew that physical, like that only time I had hope was when I was in jail, right? So I was just like, and it does suck when they really are coming for you, and they did come for me. You know what I mean? I knew they were coming for me. But that was my first sobriety date. That was December 21st, 1994. I was 24 years old. I had just turned 24 years old. And I did 30 days in jail. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think I would have stayed sober for any period of time had my first 30 days not been locked down in jail. If I had been given the ability to make any decisions on my own, I would not have chosen to stay sober. That wouldn't have been my choice. So I ended up being sentenced to a recovery home in San Diego. And I remember the judge was like, sends me to 90 days. And he goes, she's going to need at least that, right? And I'm like, yeah, at least that. I ended up staying in that recovery home for 9 months. And, and I went to a lot of AA meetings, and I got a sponsor, and then my sponsor moved away, and I had a lot of friends. And for 3 years, I was on 3 years federal probation. And for 3 years and 10 days, I stayed sober. And in that time, I got a job. I got my license. I got my kid. I got custody of my kid back. And it looked different than the life I had had before. But that is not sobriety. That does not have the depth and weight it does. You have to. I didn't take the steps. I wasn't being sponsored. I wasn't being of service to God's kids, but my life looked different, right? So my head told me this must be sobriety, right? Because I didn't have anything to compare it to. And so what happened is at 3 years and 10 days, I drank again, and everything else all in one day. All in one day, I did everything and went to work the next day. That was interesting because I had never had a job before, right? And then I insincerely sat back down in Alcoholics Anonymous for about another year. I would come and go, and I would flirt with my disease. And because what happened is when I relapsed, I told myself, you don't have a problem with alcohol. It was the other stuff, right? It was only the other stuff. And that's one of the greatest lies that a alcoholic addict can tell themselves is, oh, I just have a problem with that stuff, but this is okay, right? And um, but anyways, I ended up this time I was only drinking. And what happened is I ended up getting a DUI and I was in jail again, and I didn't think I'd ever be in jail again. And so I come to AA in handcuffs. That's how I come, you know. And again, I didn't know that the Tuesday night on the May 4th was going to be my sobriety date. I just, what happened is they took my car keys away. This because it was my second DUI. They suspended my license for a year, and I couldn't decide where I went and how I got there, and that's the only reason I was willing to let somebody else pick me up and take me to a meeting. And again, I didn't know that was going to be the day, but that was the day that like my life started turning in another direction, and it wasn't a sharp turn. It was a small movement in a different direction. And I just kept on going. At 60 days sober, at 60 days sober, I met this boy at an AA dance. I was like, hey, right. And anyways, I met him, and he was being sponsored by Michael, who is my sponsor's husband. So he introduced me to Michael and Maureen and the Paramount Speakers Group, which had just started and had about 10 people in it. And so, and which is still my home group today, by the way, and then there's 150 people in my home group on a Sunday night. So if you guys are ever in Paramount, California on a Sunday night at 7, we meet there, and it's a great speaker meeting. But I met Maureen, and I didn't ask Maureen to sponsor me right away. I was still like asking some cool girl who I thought was a cool girl, right? I was starting to do AA the way I had done it the first time without actually doing the steps. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was about 6 months sober, and Maureen stopped me at the back door of our meeting, and she told me, if you don't take the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to drink again. And I was like, you know what I mean? That was news to me. I'm 28. I think I've got my stuff together. You know what I mean? I'm not as big of a wreck as I was the first time I got sober. And, and that day isn't the day I started doing all the right stuff. I made a lot of mistakes in my sobriety, right? Because I was just trying to run my own show. But what happened for me was I got curled up in a little ball dying from alcoholism sober, that I became willing to take the steps, that I became sponsorable. I'm great at hanging out at meetings. I'm great at fellowshipping. You know what I mean? But I don't know about you, but I have no problem telling you who I'm mad at. And I don't have, fears. I can kind of do the fears, but my sex conduct, I just wasn't ready for all that yet, right? Like, I just wasn't sure I was ready to let someone tell me what to do, right? And that's how my head perceived it. And so I held on to stuff for a couple years into sobriety, and it's very, very painful. I highly recommend, if you're new, jump in and just go and do this, because what's on the other side is so much better. Now, for me, when I did my fifth step with my sponsor, I didn't walk away going, nailed it, I'm doing everything right now. You know what I mean? That isn't what happened. What happened for me when I did my fifth step was I could no longer be delusional about what a jerk I am. And I can no longer be delusional that I ain't hurting nobody but myself. And I could no longer be delusional, right, that the actions that I take aren't affecting the other people around me in some way. I couldn't do that anymore. And, and that began a slow process of slowly changing my behavior. I wasn't willing to pay the price anymore, right? At about a year sober, I started doing H&I panels. I'm absolutely in love with service work and Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's service work outside of the meetings. At a year sober, I started doing H&I panels. at 2 years sober, I started to do inner group, which is central office. And I did that. It so I went into this inner group meeting, and there's this little old guy with an oxygen tank, and he's like, I nominate. I was only there for 2 months. I nominate Tanya to be on the board. And I'm like, okay. Like, I have no idea what that means, right? Well, I found out after, well, first of all, there was no competition for this position. So, which meant no one else wanted to do it. And it was a 5-year commitment. And I didn't know that until after I said, okay. But you know what? When I walked away from that commitment, I was 5 more years sober. And I knew way more about Alcoholics Anonymous than the day I walked into it. I learned about the traditions. I learned about the traditions in my group. We've been for like 22 years doing a Steps and Traditions women's book study. I absolutely, absolutely love the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't think I would be sober today. I definitely wouldn't have the quality of life that I have without the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. Taking the steps and getting right with God and getting right with the people around you and doing all that is great. But the traditions really teach you how to play well with others and how to, live to be one among many in the world, because for a long time I thought I was such a big deal. My fears and my insecurities and my stuff was such a big deal. And it wasn't until I realized one day, I'll tell you what happened. So I of my guy I met at a dance, like we were together for 2 years, and then I was like, here's the thing about dating a newcomer. That newcomer might change their mind after they get a little more sober. So you might date newcomers at your own risk, people with time. That's what, and that was my experience. I grew and I changed my mind. And anyways, then I started dating some guy. I started chasing some guy around. Nothing like a non-committal guy to make an alcoholic woman lose her mind. Anyways, it's not his fault. It's my fault. It's my old behavior. So I was doing a little bit of light stalking and sobriety, right? Like I call it light stalking because I would just like drive by and see what cars parked out front. Like, you know what I mean? I never went and looked in the window or anything. But like I was in this relationship and through that from 2 years to 4 years sober, I caused a lot of damage in my own life. My daughter was a teenager at the time, and I was not behaving the way a sober woman in Alcoholics Anonymous should behave. I just wasn't. And you know what? And I had to learn that the hard way. And that's when I curled up in a ball, dying from alcoholism sober, feeling so sorry for myself. Self-pity's a killer. Self-pity is a killer. And what that really did for me is it drove me into a position where I had to add it. It was humbling. It was very humbling experience. And one thing I did do right during that time is I was always current with my sponsor, and I always showed up to my commitments. And you know what? She told me to keep everything around that situation in order because you need to have that stability when this is over. And it worked. And then shortly after that relationship, I met this new guy, and I really liked this guy, really liked him. And, but I still don't know how to do a relationship. I'm like, what about me? Where's mine? Right? Like, are you going to like, what's in it for me? Right? Like, it's just old behavior. And anyways, I was with this guy for like a year and a half, and I just started to be controlling, and like, he wasn't having it. And we broke up, and then he started dating the chick that sat behind me in my home group. Right. And like, yeah. And I was like, oh, and mind you, I'm very well loved in my home group. I'm in the front row. People know who I am. I'm very well loved. A lot of sponsees, a lot of friends there. And I had one sponsee come in and go, who is she? Who is she? And I'm like, go sit down. She didn't do anything to you. You just don't even worry about this, right? And this is not me, because I'm a scrapper and a fighter and a spitter. And but I told this girl, I said, I don't have a right to make you feel uncomfortable here in a meeting of AA, no matter how bruised my ego may be. And that is not me or what I wanted to do. And my sponsor said, there's a lot of women watching the way that you handle this. And I'm like, fine, right? But what I did was, for the first time in my life, I sat still in a very uncomfortable situation. I sat still being sad. I didn't go get another boyfriend. I didn't go and ruin a bunch of relationships. I didn't go and like ruin my life on behalf of hurt feelings. I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of alcoholic that if it don't feel good, I don't want to do it. Right. And I spent my whole drinking career not wanting to deal with emotions that didn't make me feel good. And this was the first time, and I was 4.5 years sober, 5 years sober. It was the first time in my life that I just sat still. And something in my head told me, be still and know there's a God and you're not it. You're not that big of a deal. Worse things have happened to way nicer people than you. Right. So, and for the first time, I just let myself be sad. And that's okay too. And you know what that did? That day, that experience, I grew up a little bit. I started to have emotional maturity, and that is an underrated thing to look for here. It's emotional sobriety is that there's that little book. I love it. I love everything about it, because that's really if you think about some of the gifts that we get here, that is among the top of the gifts we get in, that we just get to respond adultly to things happening in our life. Um, but anyways, what happened is that guy saw the errors of his way, and he came back and he made amends, and we're still together today. We've been together for 20 years. We've been married for 15. And again, had I not, I know, and you know what? And it's a good deal. Like, I couldn't fault him for doing something that, it hadn't been a year earlier, I would have did the exact same thing, right? Like, anyways, and it's been a really good. So my daughter, I raised my daughter here. She was a teenage hell on wheels like me. And I was going through all that early sobriety nonsense that didn't make it any better. And we had a rough in my family. The women come out of their terrible teens at about 22, 24, sometimes 26. My daughter, maybe 28. She took a while. She might still be mad. It's funny, we got in an argument the other day, and she was like, you never made amends to me. And I'm like, I did. And I told her when I did it, and she's like, well, like, that didn't count. And I'm like, I don't know, Amber, it worked wonders for me. So I don't know what your problem is. Like, I was no longer parenting out of guilt after that. So I don't know, I was free. So anyways, she ended up, we had a rough go of it. And but she at 20 had a baby. She has 4 children. So basically what it comes down to is I have 4 grandchildren. I now don't look like it. I have a 15-year-old granddaughter, a 13-year-old grandson, a 10-year-old grandson, and a 6-year-old grandson. And my granddaughter is taking my daughter down a little trip to memory lane right now. So I've got, her name is Marley. I call her Gnarly Marley. She's pretty gnarly right now. She's at the height of her, she's 15. So, life is in session and those things are still happening. But what I do get to do is I get to be very present for the things in my life. I'm also blessed with the opportunity to sponsor a lot of women. I have all these awesome, beautiful, everybody's so different, but all with the same problems. And I feel so blessed that Alcoholics Anonymous has seen fit to make me useful to his kids, right? That these tools that I get from AA don't just work in my life, but I get to see them work in other people's lives when they do it, when they choose to do it. And I get to watch people come in like broken, almost dead, and turn into these, beautiful women, mothers, college educated, responsible, reliable. Their families are sleeping good at night. You know what I mean? Like for every person every day that someone's with us, there's at least 10 people in our lives that are sleeping better. You know what I mean? And to get to be a part of that, like that's why I come back to AA 25 years later. That's why I sit in my seat. I don't want to miss that show. I don't want to watch, I don't want to miss the opportunity for like a useless little girl like me to have an opportunity to do something as powerful as just like take the time to walk somebody through their steps and to watch somebody have a spiritual experience of their own. You don't want to miss that, you know? So for me, it's been simple. Get a sponsor, get a home group, keep your sobriety date and help God's kids. Just help God's kids. Don't be a jerk. My sobriety sister has a saying, and I'm not saying it because it's kind of a bad word, but basically the gist of it is it's simple. Don't be a jerk and help God's kids. Right? Like, and it's that simple. And that's what I try to do today. And I got a good life. I have a good life. It's not the one like I would have thought, but it's like I would have sold myself short. I would have sold myself short. And so, you know, thank you guys so much for having me. And I'm so excited to meet so many people from so many places. This is awesome. Thank you.